This is the Roller Coaster Podcast, and I'm your host, Lucy Q. Life is a wild ride. It has twists and turns. It's scary, exciting, and downright fun. So throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride.
Episode 200 of the roller coaster will soon be here, and this is your chance to be part of the fun. I'm going to be recording this episode with coaches and listeners just like you. If you want to be part of the fun, head over to nectargrowth.com. Sign up for free and RSVP for the November 18th event. All of the details will be under the events tab. I can't wait to see you there. What are you waiting for? Come join us. You know you're worth it. More and more women are taking control of their financial futures. Traditionally, society has framed women as maybe not smart enough to understand money, and that we're perhaps frivolous spenders. We were taught that managing money was men's work. And at last, times, they are changing. Joining me today is Obu Ramaraj, an entrepreneur, author, mother, and above all, one woman wanting to empower other women to live happy, free lives by taking control of their financial futures. Hi, Obu.
Hi, Lucy. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
I think I may have butchered your name there a little bit. Did I get it close?
That's okay. Yes, close enough.
I tried practicing. It's something that's always struck me as somewhat odd, and that's, as I said before we hit record, I'm 48. And I always found it odd, the amount of women that are sort of in my age bracket, that they've always left money up to their husbands, managing money, even though they have, high-powered careers, they still leave money to their husbands. Yeah. And it's something that it confused me. So what was, for you, what's your story of wanting to empower women and, sort of liberate them financially?
Yeah, so I come from India. I studied in India. I was there for nearly 25 years. And then mine was an arranged marriage, the concept of matching based on horoscope. So my partner is Indian too. And then after my marriage, I came to Melbourne, Australia. That's where I am now. And that was a big change for me. My mom, my grandparents were there in UK for a while. So it was not more of a shock as in, how do I speak the language or the people or things like that. So I have family all over the world who visited us often. So that was not the shock. But then when I came here for the very first time, I was responsible for not just myself, but for a family, for my partner, for the future we were going to create. Back in India, my father was a businessman, so we never had to think about money. Of course, they had their initial struggle days, but from what I can remember as children, we were always happy, well provided for. And again, as girls, money was never a topic that, or something that we didn't have to handle. Yes, my parents taught us values and things around money, spend less than you make and things like that. But I never knew exactly what an investment was, or how do you manage, or how much a person makes and how much you need to, in a family. So when I first came to Melbourne, it was very interesting. And we had some interesting times, my husband and I, because I'm very OCD. And my husband, I think he's just the complete opposite, very laid back. So it was really hard to agree upon a lot of things. It took us nearly 3 to 4 years to meet that common ground. But again, after a year, my husband realized I was more financially responsible at that time than him. So he said, why don't you take care of the money side of things, like paying bills, make sure it gets done on time. And then we came up with some tips and tricks on how to remember and we created all those systems and processes. But ultimately, it was my responsibility to make sure money was taken care of. So as I mentioned before, my background is science. That's what I studied in India, biotechnology, master's in biotechnology. But when I came to Australia for the first few years, because of visa, then I had my son, so I couldn't actually go and find a job in biotechnology. And 4 or 5 years later, when I actually even did an internship, I couldn't still get a job. It was too hard. That's when I decided to move into mortgage broking. So yeah, I started mortgage broking my business in 2009, which is again predominantly for Australian people. And through my journey, then is when I saw a lot of women not having any interest in what's happening there. Their partners would ask them to sign on the dotted line, and they wouldn't even ask any questions. There's two ways to look at it. Yeah, one, you can think they have so much trust with the partner, they trust them so much. But the other thing is, when I started seeing some women going through divorce and their partner cheating them, that's when I started questioning, what are these women doing actually? They really need to be paying a little bit more attention. There's no harm in signing on the dotted line when you're asked to, but then you also need to know what you're signing for. So that's when I started getting curious about women and why they're not taking any financial interest. I guess there are a few reasons. Sometimes people don't like maths. So then they think, oh, taking control of my finance means I have to do a lot of calculations. I don't like that. I'm not going to get involved in it. I'm just going to leave it to my partner. And I guess the other thing in a family is women predominantly take care of children, and they're still working. There's like too many things to do. So they don't want yet another thing to take care of. And so they conveniently pass it on to their partners. So that's how I got curious about women and money.
That's really interesting. And that trusting to sign on the dotted line, when I hear something like that, it sends up this big sort of red alert for me, because if you don't understand what you're signing, and sure, mortgage documents, they've got more words in it than anybody cares to read. But there are certain parts that you need to be able to understand. You need to know, what is your interest rate?
Yes.
What is the term? What are your payments?
Exactly.
Because, one thing, certainly here in Canada, we've seen housing prices skyrocket. Where somebody would be paying, say $350,000 for the standard family home. In some communities, that's gone up to $800,000 or $900,000 for the same home.
Yeah.
And while on paper it looks affordable, that's based on today's interest rate.
Yes.
And people,
so true.
And people aren't actually looking, hey, wait a second. Yes, today I have a 5-year fixed mortgage. But what happens if in 5 years the interest rates have gone up even 2%?
Yes. So I guess Australian banking system is a little bit, I'm not sure how the Canadian system works, but here that's how they, when they lend you money, they don't look at how much you can borrow today, but what if the interest rate goes up by 2.5 to 2.5%? Can you borrow? That's how they actually lend you money right now. Or they've been doing that. I've been in business for 12 years, so that's how they lend money. But yeah, on another note, I'm very keen on educating people, know what you're getting into, know the terms, know what options are there. So I've always operated that way. And I was very keen on educating even back when I started. So 2 or 3 years into my business, I wrote my first book called Smart Women, Smart Home Loans, in my passion to empower women around home loans. That is more like a first home buyer's guide. It's sort of given away and sold nearly thousands of copies of that book. So that really helped. And then again, moving on, I'm still a mortgage broker. So moving on in my journey, again, I saw some women who were earning quite well, like, I don't know, 80,000 plus or $100,000, but not having any savings. I was getting curious there to say, Indians, most of them are pretty good with savings. I used to see Indian couples who don't make that much. They probably would make like 40,000 each, but they would still have like a 40,000 or 50,000 saving that they've saved up from their income, whereas some single women used to spend all of it, if not, have more debts than actually they make. So again, I got curious a second time to say, what is it and why is that happening? Men also might do the same thing, but again, because of my passion to empower women, I got curious to say, what is it that's causing this sort of divide, and how can I make a difference to at least some women? And I wrote my second book called Smart Women, Smart Habits. For me personally, I am keen and big on personal development. I'm like a sponge. I try to absorb any kind of experiment with myself as well, and I've grown on this journey. So I thought habits were really helping me initially when I started my business, in different ways, and then goal setting and so many things that I took with me on my journey along the way. So I thought, okay, I need to share this, and that's how my second book came into existence, Smart Women, Smart Habits.
So what are some of those habits that we should adopt? Because sure, we know that spending more than you earn is eventually going to catch up with you.
Yes.
We know it, but that's not what people do. People, they'll buy the expensive purse, they'll take the expensive vacation. So what are some of those habits that people can start to create in their own lives to get them on that right path?
Yeah. So what you said, spending more than you actually make, I think it comes to, you have to look deeper. It's not, again, habits, yes, it's one thing, but you have to look deeper. What is actually causing that particular habit? For example, why do you want to spend more than you make? Maybe when you were young, your parents have denied you so many things. It could be because they couldn't afford it. They were just starting their own life. They had a family they had to provide, so many different reasons. So then as a child, you feel that, okay, maybe I'm not worth it. That's why my parents are not spending or buying everything that I want. And then you carry that with you through your journey into adulthood. And when you first start earning an income, you're like, okay, I'm going to buy everything that I can and more than that, what was not offered to me, available to me when I was a child. And so you start spending more. And then when you start work, you try to keep up with your peers. And there's a pattern. It keeps going on and on until one day you think, oh, I've had enough. I can't do this anymore. I've had way too many debts. So it's really looking within yourself. What is causing that pattern of you wanting to keep buying things? Is it to fill a void? Is it to satisfy a pattern that you adopted when you were young? So it's truly important. And that can be hard work if you don't know what is causing a certain kind of pattern, not just with money, with anything, in your life. Pain and trauma are all things that are stuck within you from a particular age. So then you need to go back and work either on your own or with a coach to say, how can this pattern be eliminated, so that I can live a life that is true to myself and I'm not trying to satisfy something from my young age.
And there's two things that popped to my mind was, one, it's the term that we use here is keeping up with the Joneses.
Yes.
You're always trying to,
Yeah.
The neighbor just got a new car, so you got to get a new car, or, your brother went on this awesome vacation with his family and you have to do that. And admittedly, we've been caught up in that as well. And for me, when I think back on it, I think it always stemmed from not feeling good enough.
Yes.
Well, why don't I have that? There must be something wrong with me. Instead of actually looking at your life and simplifying, and like you said, being true to who you are. I mean, I see so many people going through the pattern of you buy your first house, and it's, depending on your culture, we call it like a town home.
Yeah.
And then, the next natural step is you level up and you get that single
Yeah.
family home. And then if,
Yeah.
you're doing well in your careers and you get an even bigger home, and then guess what?
Yes.
The kids move out, they go to college, you sell the house, you go back to the small house.
Yes.
It's like,
Yes.
I
True.
don't get that part. I don't get that part. I don't understand, people taking on these massive
Big
mortgages.
debts. Yeah, I want to share my story when you mentioned this. So we were renting for a long time. My husband and I, one thing we were really clear about is not to sacrifice our day-to-day living for the sake of a property. So even when I was a broker, we were still renting. And a lot of people used to ask me, oh, you're a broker, but you're still renting. How come? So initially it used to get to me. But after a while, I decided to be open and honest, and I advocated this to anybody who came to me and who couldn't afford a house. I said, you're not ready to buy a house. Buying a house is not just replacing your rent with a mortgage. It's much more than that. You might have to sacrifice the location you're living in. There's so many things of your you don't want to sacrifice your lifestyle. So for a long time we were renting, and we bought a house probably 5 years 6 years ago. And then this was the house that we are in is the perfect house, and we don't want to move out of it. So we never sacrificed our lifestyle for a house. And that's one of the things people need to understand, because lifestyle was important to us, and different people have different preferences, and there's nothing wrong with it. Some people are happy to sacrifice their lifestyle for a house, but the thing is, when you go into that house, don't resent it, because you're like, oh, when I was back in that location, work used to be so close. Now I'm not even staying in the house. I have to travel an hour and a half each way every day. The house that I truly wanted to, I'm not even spending much time. So I always tell my family, as well as anybody, we all have choices and we can make choices, but then every choice comes with a consequence. Be okay with that consequence, whether it is good or bad. So it's important to know that. And when you spoke about, like, naturally, as your income goes up, you expenditure goes up too, and that's fine. That's the whole point of making money. You don't want to make that much money and be a Scrooge and save everything up for someday in the future, which who knows in the current situation how long anybody, before anything happens. So I've never recommended not to spend money as you make. But again, it's creating those habits and knowing yourself. If you want to buy a car, that's fine. Again, for me personally, I've wanted a Mini Cooper for like 10 years, and I only got it 2 years ago. So you can see there was a time when in my business, I could have very easily bought a Mini Cooper, but I didn't, because I wanted the timing to be right before I knew that I was going to be okay with, the payments and everything else, and not sacrificing my lifestyle and doing anything like that. So it's okay to have goals. It's okay to want something. That's perfectly fine. It's just knowing when and how to manage other things in your life around that.
And I think one of the things that people often miss is having that nest egg, that reserve fund, the emergency fund. And, it's something that a lot of people came to terms with when we started having lockdowns and jobs suddenly changed, and some jobs took a pause. So what type of habits do you teach women around creating that emergency fund?
Back again to my story, when I first started working, I worked part-time. My income, like, I used to work after my husband came back from work, because he was a main income earner. This is when we just got married, like a year after. And my part-time work brought in like $10,000 or $15,000 maximum a year. I never used to give that money to my husband. I opened a very special savings account, and I put most of the money in that. And I've never used that money over time. Maybe once or twice I've dipped into it, but I always made sure that I topped it up afterwards. And it's so important. Like, sometimes the women might be the spender, and that's where it can get hard. So maybe if you're in a relationship, the partner can take care of it. But it's so important to know that you need to have at least 6 months of your monthly living expense saved up. So in case in an emergency, you don't have to literally be on the streets or, look for someone to help you. I'm sure in Australia we have insurance, health insurance, excuse me, and other life insurance and things like that. And people say, oh, I have insurance, I'm going to be fine. But I say, even with insurance, how sometimes it can take a long time to actually for them to process things and then provide you. Like if you have your car breakdown, again, you need some money to buy a car. It's not like you can just go, especially if you have to travel to work or if you have children and you need to take them to school. Or for example, let's say your heating breaks down, white goods, they are supposed to break down. They're not going to last forever. So you always need to have some sort of savings for any emergency. It can be health, it can be your house, whatever it is. So I suggest putting away 10% of your income every pay. If you can automatically direct it to a special savings account, that'll be perfect. And I probably would suggest if you have like a online savings account, which you can't access easily, that's even better. So then, you can see it growing and then you're not going to dip into it when you want to go and buy that dress you want.
Yeah, it's going to be on a reach. And I recently read that only 10% of people have that 6 to 12 month nest egg. And I've seen some experts even recommend that you should have 2 years plus.
Yeah.
And that's, if you're lucky, that's only 1%. So that means that, really 90% of the population, one crisis could completely tank them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen a large part of that happen over the past year. Definitely. And I can't help but wonder, whenever we're finally through, if it's ever going to exist, this mess that we're
situation.
in, if it ever goes away, what does that recovery look like? How do you even begin to, if you've depleted all of your savings and you've racked up all of your credit cards, you've tapped everything out, swinging back up and regaining any sort of financial stability is going to be really, really tough.
Yeah. For people who are actually struggling, it is very hard. I know there are a lot of people who are able to work from home, they haven't been impacted. And in fact, those people are actually, if anything at all, saving more than they normally would if the economy was all fine. But those people who are struggling, it can be hard. But I guess that's where you can pivot. And I always think back to say, like, my children are doing homeschooling. If this happened when we were studying, would it have been even possible to study? Without technology, there's no way we would have suffered and would have lost a few years of our schooling, or it would have had to be, like postponed or whatever would have happened. So there is technology. I think there is hope. So it's how can you offer your services online? There's plenty of things happening online, like everybody looks at Upwork or Elance, or there's like online places where you can go offer your services. So I believe there is hope. And also, this brings me to another point. How I mentioned, when your income goes up, yes, you do, your expenditure goes up too, and that's fine. So again, it's knowing how to cut down on your expenses if ever a situation like this happens. Maybe even in normal life, maybe one of the partner, like your husband loses a job or you lose a job, still not doing the takeaways twice or thrice a week. How do you cut down? How can you conserve and not go overboard if a situation demands like that? That's something it's very important we need to learn as well. And I myself, I practice that, like, of course, with job cuts and things like that, if ever that happens, how do you manage your budget? And the first thing for that is to actually know what your budget is. And many people don't want to go there. So yeah, it's very important to know that. So yeah, I do workshops around budgeting. How can you actually identify what your budget is? So then you can take the next step, which is adjustment. And how do you actually want to live?
Yeah. And we've actually, we've been through that process of actually realizing what you're spending. Yeah. And I think, and one thing that's easy to gloss over is that, you're putting things on a credit card, and you treat it like a bucket. You put money in, you take money out, you put money in. But if you actually stop, and I would encourage people to do this, print off 1 year of your credit card statements and go through it and highlight all of the interest charges.
Yeah.
And all of the, my husband had on one of his credit cards, one of these balance protection insurance plans that look good in theory, but if you ever try and use it, it doesn't actually work. So if you go through and you look at all of those things and you actually look at what you're spending, for me, it created a mental shift. It was just like, wait, what? Sure, you're making your payment, or you're making a little bit more than your payment, and then, something comes up and, I'm going to squeeze it on the credit card. Once you sort of have a good look at that, I've been through that. And we've also gotten to the point where we've eliminated credit card debt. So it's possible, but it's really comes down to, and it's to your point earlier, is knowing what your values are and actually having those conversations with, whether it's, a spouse, a partner, or, whoever you share your finances with, what your goals are. Because, and again, we didn't have those conversations until recently. We've been together 30 years. So when you actually have those conversations and like, well, what does our future look like? What is it that you want? What do I want? When you have those conversations, you can also see that, you can make small adjustments and nothing really changes.
I think that's the hard thing, like between spouses, there's not enough conversation, especially on topics that are icky to talk about. And then if you have different values, you don't want to talk about it at all. When you mentioned about goals, personally, I have been setting goals and doing vision boards for the last 7 or 8 years. And I've got my children to do it as well. So every year in December, before the new year starts, we all sit down. I help my children to set goals for them. It's simply around studies or any extracurricular activities or tuition, things like that. And year after year, they smash it. And last year, my son, he put wanting to go to this particular selective school where you have to take a test. And then out of 5,000 students, I think 1,000 students are chosen for the 4 selective schools. And he actually got into it. So again, I wouldn't have stressed about it if he didn't. But, sometimes I know that vision boards and goal setting works really well. Sometimes it's a matter of time. I had my Mini Cooper on my vision board for 5 or 6 years before it actually came into my life. So again, goal setting is so important. And for me, in my book, Smart Women, Smart Habits, I mentioned how to actually set goals. It's not just thinking about your business or money. There's so many aspects in our lives. As a person, for you, what do you want? Me time. Like personally, I need to have me time every day. Spiritually, what are your goals? In work or business, what are your goals? So you need to have these different categories and then set goals in each of those. So then you feel your life is as a whole is it's whole. It's not just, you're not just thinking about one aspect and setting goals and then you feel left out in other aspects. So yeah, that's the right way to set goals, and eventually goals do happen. And I strongly believe, being very spiritual, that if a particular goal doesn't happen, it means there's something better for you. But yeah, like you said, you have to sit down and think, what do you actually want and why do you want it?
Beautifully said. I sit here and I am surrounded by my vision boards. I build them and I have them around me because I sort of focus on different areas, but they're constantly around me. And, absolutely, you can put something on your vision board, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen right now. And for me, again, being very spiritual, it just means that that's not ready for me yet. Or something else is, sure, I may be setting my goals too low,
maybe,
and that's the thing. But having those conscious discussions and being open and honest with what your goals are, all of your goals, because your finances encompasses everything. All of your goals
Yeah.
in some way is going to be attached,
Yes.
for good, bad, or
Yeah.
otherwise, is going to be attached to money. Because if you want to go sit on a beach in Baja, you're still going to need money to do it, even if it's $10 a day. You still need to know that. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
Obu, before we wrap up, did you have any last thoughts or messages for women in gaining control of their finances?
Just be curious about especially if women you're not happy where you are, just get curious. Just take that half an hour and ask and get curious to know, why are you not happy about your situation right now? Because that one curious conversation with yourself can help you unravel a beautiful future that you truly deserve.
And where's the best place for people to connect with you and grab a copy of one of your books?
I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever. My handle is Obu Ramaraj. That's my name. And my book is on Amazon. You can grab a copy. If you're in Australia, I'm happy to, you can directly touch base with me and I can post. Now with COVID, we don't know when and everything, but you can always grab an e-copy, I guess, on Kindle. But yeah, you can touch base with me. I'm more than happy to share or help you guys out with any aspect of your life or your finance. Other than mortgage broking, I do coaching as well. So I'm more than happy to help you guys.
Obu, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creative.
Life is like